What's up, YouTube? So, I was recently asked about my thoughts on the everything going on with Brian Flores, and I was already planning on doing this video. I actually mentioned that I am supporting Brian Flores. I mentioned that on Twitter, but I know not everybody follows me there. My Twitter link is in the description of pretty much every video, so if you want to follow me there, go ahead and do that. But yeah, I wanted to kind of get my thoughts together and let all the information come out before I came out and spoke on it. And if information changes, then I'll address it. But as of now, I am in full support of Brian Flores in what he's doing. I hope that it brings change. I don't think it will, though. But there's a lot of different layers to this. And a lot of different teams have gotten involved in this now and kind of gotten tied up. We got the tanking situation. Hugh Jackson has been brought into this, which also brings the Browns into this. Denver and John Elway specifically have been brought into this. The Giants situation. Bill Belichick. Like, it's a lot. So, we'll start from one thing and kind of get down there. So, we'll start with the tanking part for the Dolphins. So, Brian Flores claims that Stephen Ross tried to bribe him $100,000 per game that he would lose back a couple years ago when we were trying to tank for Tua, and he said that he refused it. I don't doubt that, given the way that we pretty much let go of all of our talent. Like, right before the season started, we pretty much just cut or traded everybody. So I don't doubt that. The only thing is, Brian said that he declined the offer, which is good on him. I can't stand the idea of tanking. I think you should be trying to win regardless. And I think Brian is telling the truth about that, because at the end of the year, despite everything, we were still fighting hard. So I don't doubt Brian Flores when he says that he declined that offer. The only thing is, because he declined it, there's no paper trail. There's no proof that he was bribed. It's just between him and Stephen Ross. And 9 times out of 10, the NFL is going to side with the billionaire owner over Brian Flores. The white billionaire owner as well. So they're probably going to side with him there. And that's kind of the thing with a lot of this stuff that Brian Flores is going after. Like, I think a lot of this stuff is true, but I just have no clue how he plans on proving any of this shit. That's the unfortunate thing. So the next thing is, Hugh Jackson was brought in to this situation because he said that he was given a similar offer when he was with the Browns. And similar to us, the Browns had let go of a lot of their veterans before the season started. And it sounds like Hugh Jackson actually took the offer. And that's also still terrible. I'm not going to get too much into that situation because it doesn't as directly relate to Brian Flores. But I hope that Hugh Jackson does, get in Brian Flores' corner, because I do think that Hugh Jackson does deserve a coaching spot in the NFL. Maybe not a head coach. I don't think he's a good head coach. But you can't tell me he's a bad coordinator. He took a 31 ranked offense and then in one offseason turned it into a top 10. So you can't tell me that he's not a good coach. I don't think he's a good head coach, but he's a good coordinator. So that's my thoughts there. And I absolutely do think that there's obviously racism going on in those rooms, and they're less... Like, there's only one minority head coach in the NFL anymore, and that's Mike Tomlin. And even the position coaches, it's pretty much non-existent. And yes, I know that the majority of the players in the league are black. That is true. But the actual people making the decisions, not very many. There's not that many people in upper management. There are no minority owners, and it's unfortunate. I seen Hugh Jackson go on a podcast with Ryan Clark. I forget what they call it, but whatever. I was just watching that, and Hugh Jackson said that he's pretty much been blackballed from the league, and I tend to agree. That definitely seems to be the case. And he also said that Mike Tomlin could do probably a better job in bringing in some of these black assistant coaches. to try to groom him because he hasn't really had that coaching tree, and that is an interesting topic as well. But I don't want to get too far into that. Like I said, it's just so many layers to this shit. It's grown way beyond Brian Flores, and Brian knows that. This isn't necessarily just about him. He's taking a stand for something that's been going on for way too long. But unfortunately, I don't really see it changing. Not from this. Unfortunately, I hope I'm wrong. I just don't see it. I'll get into the Denver Broncos situation with John Elway. This one I don't think is as severe. Brian Flores said that when he had his interview with Elway, Elway and the Broncos looked disheveled. He said that he thought that they had probably been drinking the night before, and they just weren't prepared for the interview, and they weren't really taking it seriously. I don't necessarily think that that's the case. I just think, because John Elway basically had explained that I guess Brian Flores' schedule only allowed for one time slot for him to be able to meet with them. So the Broncos flew out to Brian Flores, and the result of that meant that they only got like a couple hours of sleep that night. And that is why they were disheveled during the interview, but they still gave him like a 3-4 hour interview where they took a bunch of notes and stuff. So I don't necessarily think that there's that much there. And I don't think it's a secret that the Denver Broncos want Aaron Rodgers. And that's why they hired the Packers offensive coordinator to try to incentivize Aaron Rodgers to come to Denver. I don't think that's a secret. The second I seen that that's who they hired, I was like, oh, I get it. That makes sense. So that's that situation. Now the Giants, it is definitely some shady shit. And Belichick gets kind of thrown into this too. So this started because the Giants were basically their last two candidates were Brian Daboll and Brian Flores. And they ended up hiring Brian Daboll, which is fine. I mean, I think he's a great coach as well. I wanted him for the Dolphins after we fired Flores, actually. But it seems like it was a bit of a sham interview. It definitely does, because they brought in Brian Flores when they pretty much had already apparently agreed to hire Brian Daboll as the coach, because the NFL has a rule where you have to bring in, I think now 2 minority head coach candidates from outside sources when you're hiring a new head coach, which unfortunately means that you are going to have these sham interviews. That just is what it is, because sometimes teams, when they fire their head coach, it's because they have a specific coach in mind. Like, obviously, this doesn't hold up with everything that just happened with John Gruden, but it reminds me with the Raiders situation a few years ago. They had Jack Del Rio, and they fired him, and like they pretty much openly said that they were firing him so that they could hire John Gruden. But of course, they still had to bring somebody in to talk to, technically, just to appease the rule. So we knew that that was a sham interview. So we know that that does exist, that it does happen. But Bill Belichick got involved because I guess he wanted to congratulate Brian Daboll, because I guess he's friends with him, and obviously he knows Brian Flores as well. He coached with him in New England. And I guess he texted Brian Flores, meaning to text Brian Daboll congratulations, and it was before Flores was supposed to have his interview, so that just pointed out that it was probably a sham interview even more so. It is definitely unfortunate. And I think even last year, was it last year when Dallas... No. Whenever the Cowboys hired Mike McCarthy, they brought in Marvin Lewis, I think, just as a sham interview. I think they were always intending on hiring Mike McCarthy. Can't prove it. And that's the thing. You can't really prove intent with any of this shit. That's just the unfortunate truth of it. And that's the thing. I don't know how Brian Flores can prove that the Giants are racist, because the statement the Giants made is going to be kind of hard to combat, because basically they said that Bill Belichick is not isn't connected to the Giants. He's not affiliated with them, and going off of his opinion is irrelevant, basically. And basically going off what he said shouldn't count. And that's going to be kind of hard to discredit, because they're saying that they hired the coach that they thought would be better. And that's a tough situation because I think Brian Flores and Brian Daboll are kind of around the same tier of coach right now as a head coaching candidate in my eyes. So I can't blame them, especially if you have a young quarterback and your defense is pretty good. Hiring a more offensive-minded head coach makes sense rather than the defensive-minded head coach, which is Brian Flores. So it's just kind of a tough situation. It's because I definitely think that this happens, these sham interviews happen, and it sounds like that probably happened to Brian Flores. But how you go about proving it, I don't know. And even if you can prove it, do I think it's actually going to change the way the NFL is run? No, I don't. Because at the end of the day, these like massively rich old white people are not going to change their opinions because a black dude sued them. Even if it works. Like, even if he successfully sues them and gets some money from them. What then? Like, I just don't see it changing anything. I hope I'm wrong. I don't see it. I don't see it changing a thing. My last point I kind of want to touch on is John Ross. Not John Ross. Stephen Ross, my bad. The Miami Dolphins owner, I fucking hate him. And not just because of this situation, I just think he's terrible. Since we've had him, it's been nonstop problems. He hasn't been able to put a draft together. Hasn't been able to put a coaching staff that's had any real longevity. We haven't really had much success. We've made the playoffs twice. Was he owner both those? I don't know. But we've had, since he's been there, the Bullygate scandal. We had our offensive line coach doing coke off a stripper during a game. Like, we've had so many situations. We've had our medical staff, like, constantly misdiagnosing injuries to the media and kind of making our players look like pussies. Like, we've had a lot of examples, but off the top of my head, two of them I can think of right now are Tua Tagovailoa this year, because they made Tua look like kind of a bitch because he had to be carted off the field because of a rib injury. And they first reported it as a fucking bruise. No, he had 3 of his ribs cracked. That just kind of made him look like a bitch. And then when we were going into the playoffs with Ryan Tannehill, they reported his knee, which he tore all the ligaments off the bone. And I think he did some damage to the actual kneecap too. They reported that as a fucking sprain. So, yeah. We've had more cases like that too, but those two just stuck in my head. Ryan Tannehill because that was so fucking blatant, and then Tua because it just happened this year. So we've had a lot of those types of situations, and like I said, we just haven't had much in the way of success, and it has been just nonstop issues since we've had him. He sold his soul and sold the rights to the team to SeaWorld, so now we have this fucking shitty logo and uniform. Like, nothing good has come from him being our owner. I think he's an incompetent piece of shit that knows nothing about football and doesn't care about football. Obviously, he's got to be a good businessman. Otherwise, he wouldn't be in the situation he is. But as far as football decision, he is fucking stupid. So, I don't know. Like I said, though, as far as rooting out the racism, and a lot of the other issues, the owners trying to tank for shit, I don't see any of these things going away. I just don't. And I've seen some people kind of hint at the idea of maybe setting up a lottery system like the NBA has for our draft, but the NBA tanks too. We know that the 76ers tanked and they have a lottery system. Like, there's documents showing that the 76ers tanked. They didn't even hide the shit. So I don't think a lottery system really would help it. I don't really know how you go about it. Because again, unless there's a paper trail, tanking is something that's very difficult to prove. And so is racism, unfortunately. And again, even if you can prove racism, I don't know what the fuck you're going to do about it. So, I don't know. Again, I'm definitely on Brian Flores' side unless information comes out, and I'll address it then. But as of right now, I'm fully in support of Brian Flores in this situation. So, and I also, I mean, I wasn't a fan of firing him in the first place. Like, I know they said that he was hard to work with, but now I wonder if hard to work with means he wouldn't tank. And also, Stephen Ross forced Tua on him, which he didn't want. Which I am supporting Tua. I still am. But again, forcing a quarterback on a coach that doesn't want him isn't a good idea. We've seen that multiple times, and it doesn't work ever. So, it just doesn't. And it usually results in the coach getting fired. It's bullshit. We've seen it multiple times. We've seen it with Shanahan as well with when he was with Washington. So, anyway, that's going to do it for this video. If you liked it, appreciate hitting that like button. If you have any questions or comments in the comments down below. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Bye, guys.